Welcome in, everybody. Ready to dive into Nelson Mandela?
Oh, absolutely.
We've got his Wikipedia page and some stuff from the Canadian Museum for Human Rights.
Okay.
I think we're going to go way beyond just the basic, fought apartheid, went to prison, became president.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's going to be pretty fascinating.
It is. Yeah. I think the thing that is really interesting is that all these little details, these contradictions in his life really help us to understand the complexities of this whole struggle against apartheid, the whole movement.
Yeah, let's start with his childhood.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't exactly typical, right?
No, not at all.
Like, what was going on there?
So he was born into the Thembu royal family,
Okay.
but his branch was ineligible for the throne.
Oh.
So almost like a morganatic branch.
Huh?
In European royalty where you have the status, but you're excluded from that main line.
Yeah.
So he grew up with this very unique perspective on power,
Interesting.
possessing it, but also being aware of its limits.
And his name? Rolihlahla?
Yeah.
Which means troublemaker.
Yeah.
Any truth to that, even in his early years?
Well, he was suspended from university for participating in a boycott over food quality.
Oh, wow.
So challenging authority was definitely part of his personality from early on.
Yeah.
It seems that he just wasn't one to accept things as they were.
Right. And it almost foreshadowed his later activism.
Totally.
We have this young man, he's steeped in traditional African culture, but also exposed to this British colonial education.
Right.
And he even supported Britain during World War II initially.
Right.
What do you make of all that?
It's really interesting how much his political consciousness changed over time. He was absorbing all these different ideologies. He's grappling with these competing influences. And so I think this period really sets the stage for him to transform later into this revolutionary figure.
Yeah, so how did he make that leap from law student to leader in the ANC?
So he joined the ANC Youth League. But here's the fascinating thing. At first, he wasn't into working with communists or non-Black activists, which is such a contrast with what he championed later on.
Totally.
It really makes you think about what shifted his perspective so dramatically.
Yeah, and his work as a lawyer must have played a role in that too.
Oh, definitely.
He opened the only African-run law firm in South Africa.
Right, and he's seeing these everyday brutalities of apartheid through his clients. And so this firsthand experience, I think, really fuels his desire for change.
Right.
And it gives him this deep understanding of the legal system that he was going up against.
Yeah, and his personal life went through some changes too during this period, right?
Yeah.
I know the sources mentioned his first marriage ending.
Yeah, his marriage to Evelyn Mace just couldn't withstand the pressure of his activism, And he later married Winnie Madikizela, who herself became a very powerful figure in the movement.
Oh, wow.
It shows just how intertwined his personal life was with the struggle against apartheid.
Yeah, so from lawyer to activist, the fight intensifies.
Mm-hmm.
What role did Mandela play as this anti-apartheid movement is gaining momentum?
He was a key organizer of the Defiance Campaign in the early 50s, which was this massive nonviolent resistance against these unjust laws. It was a huge turning point, showing the power of peaceful protest on a scale that South Africa hadn't seen before.
And then, in 1956, came the treason trial.
Oh, yeah.
Mandela and over 150 others are arrested, accused of treason against the state.
It's crazy.
It dragged on for years before they were finally acquitted.
Yeah.
But then things took a more radical turn in 1960 after the Sharpeville massacre.
Right.
And that's when Mandela co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the ANC.
Right. For Mandela, Sharpeville was this turning point. This police brutality against these peaceful protesters convinced him that nonviolent resistance alone was not going to be enough to dismantle apartheid.
And that decision to engage in armed struggle is one of the most controversial aspects of his legacy.
Absolutely.
It raises all these questions about the ethics of violence, the complexities of fighting oppression, the justifications for armed resistance.
Right.
But it also, of course, led to his arrest in 1962 and decades of imprisonment.
Yeah, it's just amazing how his life took these dramatic turns in such a short period. It really shows how even the most iconic figures have these complex journeys and make these difficult choices in these really extraordinary circumstances. And for Mandela, this is just the beginning of this long and hard chapter.
Yeah.
His time on Robben Island is going to shape him in really profound ways.
Absolutely.
I mean, Robben Island was just brutal.
I mean,
hard labor, isolation, constant surveillance.
yeah.
But even in those conditions, Mandela found ways to resist, to be a leader.
He even studied law in prison, didn't he?
He did. He got a law degree through a correspondence course from the University of London. It's amazing, even in that environment, so restrictive, he was still seeking knowledge, working on his legal skills.
That's wild. It really shows his resilience and determination to use every tool that he could.
Absolutely.
Well, one thing that really stuck out to me
Yeah.
is that he learned Afrikaans,
Oh, yeah.
the language of his oppressors.
Yeah.
Why would he do that?
That's a great question. And it wasn't just for practical reasons, you know.
Right.
He really saw it as a way to understand his captors.
Right.
To build a bridge. It was this small act of defiance, showing them that he wouldn't be defined by their hatred.
Yeah.
And it also reflects this, growing belief that he had in dialogue as a path to reconciliation.
And all this while he's in prison.
Right.
His profile is growing around the world.
It is, yeah.
He's becoming a symbol of the anti-apartheid movement, a symbol for activists everywhere.
Yeah, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize multiple times while he was still in prison. And then finally he received it jointly with F.W. de Klerk in 1993.
It's kind of paradoxical
Yeah.
that a man who spent 27 years in prison becomes this key figure
I know.
and negotiating a peaceful transition to democracy.
It's incredible.
How did that happen?
Well, it was a long process, delicate.
Yeah.
It all started with these secret talks when he was still imprisoned. By the late 80s, the apartheid regime was facing a lot of pressure.
Right.
Internally, internationally.
Yeah.
They knew that negotiations were unavoidable.
And then in 1990, after decades in prison, Mandela's released.
It was a moment of global celebration.
What was it like in South Africa at that time?
Oh, just electric.
Really?
Euphoria, this feeling that anything was possible.
Wow.
But also a lot of uncertainty, tension, the transition to democracy. It was full of challenges.
And Mandela's got to navigate this really complex political landscape.
He does, yeah.
There are divisions in the ANC, there's ongoing violence, and he's negotiating with the very people that were his oppressors.
Exactly.
How did he manage that?
It took some incredible leadership
Yeah.
and a willingness to compromise.
Uh-huh.
So there was this thing called CODESA,
Okay.
the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, basically a series of negotiations. And it was really make or break.
Yeah.
I mean, Mandela and de Klerk, they were under immense pressure.
And it wasn't a smooth process, was it?
No, there were breakdowns in the negotiations, massacres like Waipatom.
Right.
I mean, there was a real risk the country would descend into civil war.
Absolutely. I mean, were there points when you thought, oh, this is going to collapse?
Yeah, absolutely. There were points when it looked like the talks would fall apart.
Yeah.
Mandela even called for a UN peacekeeping force at one point.
Wow.
But they just kept pushing forward because they understood that the alternative was unthinkable.
Right.
A spiral of violence. It couldn't continue.
And then finally, in 1994, the first multiracial elections.
Wow.
An incredible moment.
A watershed moment. The ANC won by a landslide.
Wow.
And at the age of 75, Nelson Mandela becomes the first Black president of South Africa.
It was the culmination of a lifetime of struggle.
Yeah.
What were his priorities as president?
Reconciliation, nation building.
Yeah.
He knew that to heal the wounds of apartheid was crucial for South Africa's future.
I think one of the most powerful examples of that is how he embraced the Springboks, the national rugby team.
Right. I mean, for many Black South Africans, the Springboks were a symbol of white supremacy.
Right.
But during the 1995 Rugby World Cup, Mandela famously wore a Springboks jersey.
He did, yeah.
And encouraged Black South Africans to support the team.
Wow.
And then the Springboks won. He presented the trophy to Francois Pienaar, the Afrikaner captain.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a gesture that went beyond sport.
Right.
A powerful symbol of unity and forgiveness.
Yeah, it must have been such a powerful moment for everybody involved.
Totally.
And this focus on reconciliation, did it extend to his policies?
Absolutely. His government introduced a new constitution with equal rights for all South Africans. And they also launched the Reconstruction and Development Program to address the socioeconomic inequalities of apartheid.
But there were also criticisms, weren't there?
Oh, yeah, of course.
People who felt like maybe he was focusing so much on reconciliation that that economic justice wasn't happening fast enough for the black majority.
Right. Some critics thought he was too willing to compromise with the old guard.
Yeah.
That the economic transformation wasn't radical enough.
Ah.
And there were also concerns about how his government handled the HIV/AIDS crisis.
It's a reminder that even the most revered figures are human.
They are.
You know?
Yeah.
They face complex challenges. They make difficult choices.
Right.
They're not immune to criticism.
Right. It's important to avoid those simplistic narratives.
Yeah.
You know, Mandela was a man of contradictions, a pragmatist, but he held on to his principles.
Right.
His presidency was a time of both progress and missed opportunities.
Yeah, it's complex. Yeah, it seems like every part of his life is full of contradictions. You know, the revolutionary who embraced peace, the prisoner who forgave his captors.
Yeah.
And even after he stepped down as president,
Right.
he was still in the public eye.
He was, yeah.
But in a different way.
It was different, yeah. His focus shifted more to philanthropy and international affairs. You know, speaking out against injustice, advocating for peace.
Right.
He even helped start the Elders.
Oh, yeah.
That group of world leaders working to solve global issues.
It's amazing to think after everything he went through,
I know, right?
he still had the energy for these causes.
Well, he had this really deep belief in humanity's potential for good.
Yeah.
But, you know, even Mandela couldn't escape aging. And so in his later years, he kind of had to withdraw from public life as his health declined.
His death in 2013 has a huge loss.
It was. I mean,
Felt around the world.
Yeah. I mean, the outpouring of grief and the tributes was just incredible.
Yeah.
A real testament to his global impact and the lasting power of his message.
Thinking about everything we've talked about today, you know, I can come back to one question.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile the Mandela who embraced armed struggle with the Mandela who championed peace and forgiveness?
Right. It's tough.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It really gets at how complex he was as a leader and as a person.
Right.
I mean, it's a tension that runs through his whole life.
Yeah.
And people are still debating it. There's no easy answer.
Right.
I think that's part of what makes his story so fascinating.
Do you think that almost saint-like image that's developed around him, that iconic status, does it make it harder to understand him?
That's interesting. I mean, I think it definitely has helped to spread his message of peace and reconciliation, you know, on a global level. But you're right. It can sometimes overshadow the nuances, the difficult decisions that he made.
It's like we need to remember the human being behind the icon.
Absolutely.
He was flawed.
Yeah.
He was brilliant. And he faced extraordinary circumstances with courage and conviction.
Right. I think the best way to honor his legacy is to engage with it critically.
Yeah.
To really grapple with those complexities and to remember that even our heroes are human. You know, we can find inspiration not just in his achievements, but in his struggles and his ability to change and adapt.
So what does Mandela's life tell us about leadership and the possibility for change?
Well, I think it really shows the power of resilience, forgiveness, that unwavering belief in a better future. He showed us that personal and political transformation can happen even in the most difficult situations. Yeah. And that dialogue, however hard it is key to bringing people together.
He truly lived an extraordinary life.
He did.
Well, this has been an incredible look into the life of Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
I think we just scratched the surface.
Yeah, just a glimpse.
But hopefully it gave everyone a better understanding of the man behind the myth.
And hopefully it made some people want to learn more.
Yeah, go check out his writing.
Yeah, the documentaries are great.
Yeah, discover him for yourselves.
There's so much to learn.
Well, it's been great diving in with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,
keep learning,
and keep diving deep.